Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Patrice, and in this video we'll be discussing things I've read. And now let's get started. So in this video I'm going to talk about 3 books that I have read recently. The first book is Misery Hates Company by Elizabeth Hobbs, and this is a cozy mystery. This is also the debut, so this is the first in the series by Elizabeth Hobbs, and I will give you the overview. Marigold Manners is invited to Great Misery Island after receiving a letter from a distant relative and ends up entangled in a murder mystery. Her suspicions immediately turn to her hostile, weapon-wielding relatives. As secrets are uncovered and lies exposed, the question of who done it turns into who didn't do it. So my list of likes for this book, there were lots of twists and turns. 2 characters popped out for me as my favorites, and they were Lucy and Bessie Dove, a mother and daughter duo. And I would very much enjoy a series just about these 2 characters. Like, they were so good. I hope, like, we see more of them like throughout the series. The things on my list of dislikes. So one of the reasons Marigold went to Great Misery Island was because one of her relatives said that there was like this great wrong that was done to Marigold's mother, and they were going to make up for it if she came there. Like, she would learn what this big secret was, and they would do right by Marigold and do right by her mom if she came out there. So the big secret, when we actually found out what it was a big letdown. It was very confusing and unbelievable, and it just did not make any sense, like none at all. Also in this book, we see the independent woman trope. So Marigold, she's like very independent, like she doesn't want to be tied down with a man. She wants to do everything herself, and that ends up getting her into like some very like silly situations. Like, if she had only asked for help, or let someone help her, it would have been fine. And then she's also pushing away a guy that really likes her just because she doesn't want to be tied down. And it's like, okay, all right, we get it. I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating just because I'm not sure if I like it yet, because this is the first one. So I need another one in the series, and then I will make, like another decision. We'll have to see how it goes. So the next books that I read were Don't Cry for Me and Isaac's Song. Now, I know these books are making their rounds on Booktube, and I did take some other booktubers' suggestions to read them together, which was a very good idea. Both of these books are by Dr. Daniel Black, and I knew who Dr. Daniel Black was because he comes on Karen Hunter's show on Sirius XM 126 on Urban View, and usually he's on there on Mondays. So I was introduced to him, and I've wanted to read his books because everyone calls into the show and they said how they love the books. So I've already wanted to read his books. But now that Isaac's Song has come out, and I've seen other people's reviews, I said this will be the perfect time. And the last time I was in the library, both books were there. So I said, oh, jump on it, get these books. So guys, this is going to be a long review. Like, both books, like, they made me think. Don't Cry for Me had me like in here, just like all in my feelings. So I have a lot of notes, a lot of quotes, and hopefully I can convey to you what I was thinking from the books. Um, so I hope you can understand what I'm putting down. Yeah, that was very old school. But let's start with Don't Cry for Me. So again, author Dr. Daniel Black. This is a historical fiction and also an epistolary novel because it is written in letter form. The overview says, as Jacob lies dying, he begins to write a letter to his only son Isaac. There are things Isaac must know, stories about his ancestral legacy in rural Arkansas, secret from Jacob's relationship with Isaac's mother, and tragedies that inform Jacob's role as a father and his reaction to Isaac's being gay. Jacob must share the unspoken truths that reside in his heart and give voice to the trauma Isaac has inherited, and he must create a space for the two to find peace. So I like this book because it examines the parent-child relationship and how we can pass our trauma and strengths on to the next generation. So this really made me think about my relationship with my parents. One of the things that I noted was that, Jacob had some really troublesome attitudes about women, marriage, and fatherhood, and also parenting. But that is what the story was ultimately about. Like, that's a big part of the story. So that makes sense. Now, let's get to my bullet points, like, of what I thought overall after finishing the story. So, like I said, this caused me to think about my parents and like my relationship with them, like growing up, and now that I'm a parent myself. Um, yeah, just thinking about that relationship in general, child and parent relationship. So, the first thing that I um, thought about was how we as children don't know what our parents have gone through. And the bigger thing that I took from that is that we need to share our stories with the younger folks. So a lot of us, we don't know um, what our parents have gone through, or like the older people in our families. Like, we don't get those histories, and then, it's too late. Like, then you don't have time to ask them. So, it's nice to be able to share your story, because then, like, your children or the younger generation can understand like what you went through and what kind of like shaped you into who you are. So I thought about that just because it just seemed like Jacob and Isaac had a disconnect and they just didn't understand each other. But then I was thinking in general, like how um, Jacob and Isaac's mom, her name is Rachel, like how they really didn't share like what it was like growing up, like in segregation, and just like with Jacob, with his family, like how he was just like a couple generations removed from slavery. So that would have been nice to share with Isaac, so like he knew where he came from. And the next thing I thought of is our parents love and care for us the best way they know how, but even though they care, they can still be wrong and do damage. So I know Jacob cared about and loved Isaac, like from the story and from the letters and just like some of the things he said. But, some of the things that he did, it was quite damaging. Um, he was trying to do the best that he could do, But even still, like, he said some very hurtful things. He did some very hurtful things. Um, just like, abusing, like Isaac and his mom. Um, just like with like spankings and all that. Like, there is like so much like new research that shows like you cause a lot of trauma, like when you spank your children and stuff like that. So it's just showing like how you may think you're doing the right thing, but it can still be hurtful. And then you have to, take accountability for that and apologize and figure out like how you can make it right. And even though, as parents, we look at kids like they are, I guess sometimes like they don't have like their own feelings and things, but they do. And we do have to take that into account. It's so hard because it's sort of like, you want to direct them in everything, but they still have their own opinions and their own feelings and stuff like that. So you do have to take that into account. The next big thing um, that came out for me through the books is that trauma is passed on through the generations. And then I thought about, well, how do we break these cycles? Like, how do we heal from that? Um, and how do we, I guess, pass on better ways of coping and dealing with things to the next generation so they don't make the same mistakes that we made? So that is another thing I was thinking about. And then another question is, what have I inherited or passed on? So, like I said, now that I am a parent, now I'm thinking about, well, what are those things that I inherited from my family? And then, like, what did I pass on? And again, like, how can I pass on the strengths but not the trauma? So that has been something that's definitely been on my mind. The next point I was thinking about is, what is fatherhood and what is motherhood? And like, what does it mean to be a man or a woman? Just because on page 67, so Jacob says, I was a man the way I'd been taught to be a man. And then on page 85, it's talking about Isaac's mom, and it says, Rachel gave up college to be a mother. So, in essence, she abandoned her dream and became what the world said she should be. So, again, like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to be a man? What does that mean to be a woman? And I just think Jacob had some very outdated ways of thinking. But then again, for that time, like the time that the story is set in, that's just like what they believe. Like, the men go out and work and provide, like, they're not there emotionally, and the women are the ones who raise the children, they stay home. And even if like you're smart and you have dreams, that's not what you do. Like, your greatest job or what you should be striving for is to be someone's wife or mother. Now, I totally know I would not have worked out well back in those times, because I can't with that kind of thinking. But then it just made me think, like, these outdated ways of thinking about these topics, like, are still around. Like, like now we have like the whole trad wife thing, and it's just like amazing to me, like how we're still like trying to fit um, people like in these little boxes that we make for them, instead of just saying, you know, you're a person with like your own feelings and thoughts about things. So that was interesting to me, like how these thoughts are still here and present today, and even more so like with the things that are going on, um, like in some parts of the country, like now they've passed like this act, and like women may have a harder time voting because, their name on their birth certificate does not match their married name and stuff like that. Or just like how the government is trying to tell women what to do with their bodies and stuff like that. So just how these things are still perpetuated. Now I'm just going to give some of the quotes that I pulled from Don't Cry for Me. So, page 17, um, Jacob was writing in one of his letters. He says to Isaac, "Slavery did a number on black people. We haven't survived it yet. The institution is over, but its after effects still linger. We learned to despise ourselves, not white folks, because our failure, we think, was having been captured at all." So I pull this out just because, like, I definitely agree that the after effects still linger. And just how I was saying before, like, trauma is just been passed on throughout the generations, and like you can see it, like you can definitely see how it's still showing up today, the after effects of slavery, like in the wealth gap, um, between black people and other people in this country, the health disparities that we go through, um, the infant and maternal mortality rates. So the after effects are definitely still here. And then we do have some people that are just like um, self-hating, like they really believe that um, like black people kind of have brought all of these issues and things on themselves instead of seeing it as like systemic issues that were put upon us. And like just having all that trauma and terror done to like a certain group of people, like you are definitely going to see some after effects. So I think that's definitely true. Let's see. The next quote I have is from page 19. And Jacob was writing, "I was born a slave, Isaac. Even after freedom, we aren't free. We were lynched and beaten and mobbed and raped and burned out and stolen from and cheated and denied and degraded and humiliated and insulted and belittled and disrespected so much that we believed white folks were God's chosen people. We had to watch our backs everywhere we went. We were never safe in this country. Can you imagine that? A life where you and your family are never safe?" So I just pull that out because, again, like we were saying, like all that trauma, like to be lynched, beaten, mobbed, raped, burned out, stolen from, cheated, humiliated, like all of those things, and to never feel safe. Like I think we are still experiencing that, and like even today, like in today's political climate, um I definitely could see how that resonates like today. So like even in my own life, like being like a wife and mother, like you get scared sometimes for your kids, but even like other people in my family, like well, what happens if they get pulled over, or like certain areas or places are not safe um, for you to go in. And that's just hard to, think about sometimes, like I have to be mindful of where I'm going, like in 2025. Like, that's like bonkers to me. And let's see. One other thing that I realized, um, or that I noted when I read the book, is that most of the main characters have like biblical names. And then the story kind of lines up with the people in the Bible that they were named after. So then we have Jacob, who is Isaac's father, and then we have Rachel, his mother, and then we have Leah, who Jacob cheated with in the book. And then in the Bible, Jacob is married to um, Rachel and Leah. They were sisters, and he was married to them in the Bible. And then we have Esau, who is Jacob's brother in the book. And then in the Bible, he was also Jacob's brother. Then we have Isaac, who was actually um, Jacob's father in the Bible, but he's his son in the book. Then we have Abraham, who was Jacob's grandfather, but Abraham was the father of Isaac in the Bible. And then we have Sarah, who was um, Jacob's mother in the book, but she was Abraham's wife in the Bible. So I just thought, like, all of those um, names, like, those were actually like the patriarchs and matriarchs in the Bible stories. So that was interesting as well. So those are my thoughts on Don't Cry for Me. And now we will move on to Isaac's Song. So Isaac's Song, again, written by Dr. Daniel Black. And this is also a historical fiction, sort of like contemporary fiction. In the overview, Isaac is at a crossroads in his life. Growing up in Missouri, he was conditioned to suppress his artistic pursuits and physical desires. But now in Chicago, Isaac has finally carved out a life of his own. At his therapist's encouragement, Isaac begins to write down his story. As he taps into his creative energy, he begins a journey back to his family's ancestral home in Arkansas and the inherited trauma of the past. So this book, I really enjoyed the therapy sessions between Isaac and his therapist the most. And this made me think about how we have to let go of the trauma that we're carrying around, and that we may have to do it without closure from the person that hurt us. So I thought of that just because Jacob is no longer here. He has now died, and Isaac's going to therapy like after Jacob passes away. The only thing I really didn't enjoy was like the story within the story. So Isaac is trying to write a book, and like that part, I just wasn't feeling that part as much. Like, it just didn't feel like it really fit with the story. I would have enjoyed more like therapy sessions with him and the therapist, and him like working out like his healing and stuff like that. Although, the fiction story gets us to part of his healing, like I really didn't think, that we needed that part. But now let me give you my notes that I wrote down as I thought over Isaac's Song after I finished it. So, like I said, this caused me to think of my relationship with my children, just because I'm a parent, and now I'm thinking about like how they see like our relationship and stuff like that. So my first thought was, again, just like I thought in Don't Cry for Me, like what have I passed on to them? Like the good and the bad things, the strengths and the weaknesses. And the other thing I thought is like, do they see me as a person, or have they kind of like put me on a pedestal? And I think that's normal for kids to do with their parents, to put them on a pedestal. But I am, I guess I have gotten to a point where I want them to see me as a person. Like I have feelings, I have thoughts, and like everything is not like all about them. Um, so, and it's very hard to live up to like this ideal, like especially if they think like you're this big hero, because you know we are people and we are going to have flaws. Like um, that does not mean um, like we should not be accountable to them, like just because we are human beings and we're going to mess up. But it does mean like I'm not going to get everything right all the time. So like please keep that in in mind, like if you are a child and dealing with a parent. Think about that. The next thing that I noticed, um, I really did like how Isaac had to go on his healing journey without his dad's input. So sometimes we feel like we need the other person that hurt us or did something to us to admit they were wrong so that we get closure. But this story showed how you can work through the pain like on your own without having their input. And one thing that I like that the therapist said to him, and this is from page 11, she says to Isaac, "You're too smart to be imprisoned by your father's shortcomings. Nothing has ever happened to you that's greater than your power to heal it. Blaming others is merely an excuse to avoid activating your own personal strength." And I think we as people, we do that all the time. Like we want to blame someone else. We want it to be someone else's fault. And, you know, that helps us to like hold on to the anger and to hold on to the offense. But like we can't do that. Like if we do want to heal, like sometimes we will just have to um, figure out like what did this teach me, or how do I get past this without having this person even acknowledge that they were wrong, because sometimes you will not get an apology, and like how are you going to get beyond it? um, and then another question she asked him was, what did pain teach you? And I think that is an interesting question, because a lot of the time, like I think like sometimes we think pain just teaches us how to hurt, but sometimes it can make you stronger. It teaches you like maybe something like you don't like, and then not that you don't like, what am I? It shows you how you want to be treated, like in the future, like pain. Or it teaches you a valuable lesson, like about trust and um, the things that you like and what you don't like, or how you like to be treated. So I thought that was an interesting question. Let's see. So on page 24, Isaac says about his dad, "Sometimes he was quite gracious, actually. As a kid, I misunderstood this and took his kindness as responsibility." And I thought that was very, very interesting. Just from reading this book, I had to really think about, like, have I said thank you, like, to the people that have raised me and helped me along the way. And I know as children, like, we don't ask to be here, but thank you goes a long way, because, like, when your parent or whoever, shows up for you in life, when they show up to that game, or you get that new pair of sneakers, or, um, you know, they go to a job that they don't like and stuff like that, they're doing it because they love you. And I know, like, the bare minimum, you know, as a parent, you got to feed the child, you got to make sure they have a roof and stuff like that. But all of the other things require a sacrifice. And sometimes as children, we forget to say thank you. And me as an adult, like, after I read this book, I called my grandmother to thank her for, like, all of the sacrifices that she has made for me, like, taking care of me, because, I know it was hard for her and tough, and I know she had to give up a lot. And, sometimes as kids, we just think it's automatic. Like, well, you got to do this because you're my parent, like, you're the adult, so you got to do it. And yeah, sometimes it's just like, well, you know, I don't have to, like, I want to, and I love you. So yeah, I'm going to, but, thanks goes a long way. Let's see. The next thing I made note of was that we have to examine the good with the bad. And this is just in, as it relates to Isaac, and thinking about Jacob. And, like, he remembered, like, all of the ways in which Jacob mistreated him, but he also had to realize that there were some good times in there as well. Like, for example, Isaac wanted this tricycle really badly, and Jacob, was able to get it for him. Isaac volunteered a Christmas tree for for his fifth grade class. He said he was going to bring it in, and he asked his mom to do it. And you know who brought it there? Jacob. And he brought a live tree, and a big one. And, like, Isaac did not thank him for the tricycle. Like, he didn't even think to ask him about the tree. Um, Isaac also wanted, like, a piano and piano lessons, and Jacob ended up saving up for that piano. And, he did not let him quit. He did not let Isaac quit playing the piano when he wanted to. He had a recital, and he kind of got flustered, and, he wanted to, like, quit and not play his recital song. And Jacob was the one who encouraged him to not be a quitter and to go back in there and, um, play his song. And he did do it, and he did, like, such a wonderful job. Like, everyone was, like, in awe that he could play that well. And there's also in the book, like, some things, like, Jacob taught him about self-respect and how not to let other people, um, use him for their own gains. And he gave Isaac structure and discipline. So, along with being mistreated, he also taught him some valuable life lessons, and, um, gave him some good memories too. So we have to remember that people are complicated. Like, like, I don't think, like, people are all bad or all good. They're just very, very complicated. Like, you'll have one person who loves you and one person who can't stand you. So, um, yeah, there's a lot of gray in between. The next thing I noted was, don't squander the sacrifices our parents, families and ancestors gave us. So on page 153, Jacob is celebrating Isaac's graduation, and he tells Isaac, he says, every generation before you prayed for what you finally got. We wanted it too, worked hard for it, but we didn't have the opportunity. We gave you a gift, boy, you and all colored children in this country, and we paid dearly for it. You ain't lucky, but you mighty blessed. So I think that just goes to show like all of the abuse and terror and trauma and discrimination that our ancestors have gone through, people in our families, our parents, all the sacrifices that they make for us, working maybe 2 or 3 jobs, doing a job that they don't like, and we cannot squander, that gift that they gave us to, do a bit more better than they did. Like, we can't squander that. So now it's our turn to, make good on what we've been given so that the next generation can progress even further than we have. And that's one thing I'm thinking about now. Like, am I setting up the next generation to go beyond what I've done? Like, how can I set them up to be even better in the future? And it's not only like monetary, like passing on wealth and stuff like that, but it's also about healing the trauma that has been passed on to us as well. Like, we can give them a gift like of being unburdened by that trauma. That would be even better for the next generations to get even further on. Let's see. So on page 211, the therapist asks Isaac, do you think Black parents did your generation a favor by protecting you so completely? So what she's asking him about is kind of Isaac's parents sheltered him from the racism that they experience. So Isaac answers her and he says, we didn't have the same burden of race as they did. We were freer, but we were blind. And the question came up, like, the burden of race versus the freedom of ignorance. And I think that is coming up today. Like, I'm thinking, like, in general, just like in, like, bringing up kids today, like, are we doing them a disservice by not talking about, like, our history and things that have happened in the past? Now, for me, myself, I have not had any, like, overt racist things. Like, I've never been called the N-word or anything like that. But I have experienced, like, microaggressions. I've been followed around the store before, stuff like that. So it's like, how much of that story do you want to tell your kids? And then, like, I'm just wondering about their perceptions and how they see race. So, like, with my kids, like, we've talked about, like, Trayvon Martin and, like, some of the other injustices and things that we see in this country, but I just don't think they have the same, like, burden of race that I grew up with. So that was just interesting. Like, are we protecting them or are we setting them up? Because when they do get to experience like any racism or racist incidents, like, are they going to know how to handle it? Like, what's going to happen then? And then, are we setting up the next generation to not know how to I guess, combat these things. Like we're seeing it now, like a lot of the older like freedom fighters and stuff like that, they have not passed on the torch. Well, not even pass it on, because they can still fight and be involved, but they have not lit the next generation's torch. And it's like we have no experience with like segregation or um, like being organized like our ancestors. So, you know, like how are we going to get it together for the next generation so we can light their torches? And that's something I'm thinking about. Like, how can I get involved and how can I start um, like helping with those efforts? Let's see. Now, page 252. Now, this really set me to thinking. He says, you must learn to uproot unwanted seeds without destroying the entire harvest. Nurture good sprouts. Toss weeds aside. Weeds have a valuable function. They teach you what to avoid, what not to embrace. Now, this made me think of another book that I am in the middle of reading, and it's called The Garden Within by Dr. Anita Phillips. Now, in this book, Dr. Phillips says, like, your heart is like the soil of a garden. And so the soil can be rocky, it could be good soil, it could be thorny. And what's planted in that soil grows up to be your thoughts. So you have to look at like your heart to your brain, and it's sort of, you're looking at it like a plant. So like I said, your heart is the soil. You get seeds that are planted in there. So maybe, you know, like your mother tells you you can't sing or you're not good at singing, like stop that singing, so you don't sing. So then the thoughts grow up that, you know, you're awful at singing, that's not something you should do, you're not talented. So it's just showing you how your heart and your mind are connected, and it's sort of like a plant or like a tree or something else that grows. So you have to look at the soil, and you have to look at the seeds, and you have to look at the resulting growth. And that just connects me right to what Jacob was saying, like how you nurture the good and then you pluck up, you know, the weeds and what's bad. And that totally relates to what she is saying in The Garden Within. And I have been doing like a lot of thinking like about like what's in my garden. Like, what are the good things I want to keep, and what are the weeds that I can pluck up, and what can I plant that is new that will sprout up into good things? So definitely ties in to my book, and I would definitely suggest that people read this. This is not like a very thick volume, but it will make you think. I could not read it straight through because, you know, like the processing, it does take a lot to process. But she also has like some good videos on YouTube about the same topics. She also has a podcast, and it has been very, very helpful. So I would suggest you pick up The Garden Within as well. And the last couple of things that I got from Isaac's song, on page 254, Jacob says to Isaac, live your life freely. And I was just struck by that. And then I was thinking, well, what does that mean? Like, you know, what does it mean to live freely? And that is going to be something that is different for everybody. But me, myself, as like a wife and mother, um, you give up so much. You give up so much of your time and of yourself, and you just sometimes you lose yourself, like that little spark in you, because you're taking care of other people and you just get like so busy with life and other things. So it just made me think, what does that mean to live freely? Um, it makes me excited too to see what like new opportunities and experiences are going to come, especially now that my kids are getting older. They are adults. I have a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old. Ooh, look at me. Doesn't look like it, does it? Hey. um, but it does make me think, like, what is this next chapter going to bring? And what kind of experiences am I going to have? And how does living freely weave into this new chapter? And the last thing I wrote down was let it go. And I think this really sums up the journey that Isaac is going on, like how he has to let go of the trauma and the things that happened to him as a child so that he can live freely. And it just makes me think, like, even in my own life, like the things I have to let go of, like if you are going to, progress further or get any type of healing, like there may be things you just have to let go of. Like you may not ever be able to resolve it. You have to just think about, like, am I going to hold on to this and let it keep hurting me, or am I just going to let it go? So those are my thoughts on Isaac's song. And now for the ratings. Now, like I said, Don't Cry for Me. I don't know why, that just had me like all in my feels. I really, really enjoyed Don't Cry for Me. And I ended up giving that a 5-star rating. And Isaac's song, I enjoyed it, but I think I like Don't Cry for Me a little bit more. Isaac, sometimes he just rubbed me the wrong way. Like he was just like so arrogant. But Don't Cry for Me, Jacob was just like, oh, great. Like his thinking just got on my nerves. But like I said, I enjoyed Don't Cry for Me a little bit more. So I am going to give Isaac's song a 4.5 stars. But again, both of these books, I do suggest you read them together. Like the other YouTubers are saying, I really enjoyed both of these books, and I look forward to reading more from Dr. Daniel Black. That is actually going to be the end of this video. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.